Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Roth.
And you have yet another success story
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. I am so excited to have Dr. Stephanie Fein on with me today. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
We're going to talk about a topic that can be quite sensitive, and it's about optimizing your fertility through weight loss. And there's no better person to talk about this today than you.
Thank you so much for being here. It's my favorite topic on the planet.
Good. We will get along beautifully because there's nothing I like talking about more than fertility. So it's great that you're just as passionate about what you do. I'd like to tell our listeners a little bit more about you. You attended Tufts University and you received your BA in social psychology and earned your medical degree from UC Irvine and completed your internal medicine training in a residency program through UCLA. I know that school a little bit myself. You then obtained a master's in public health, just like me, at UCLA while finishing a research fellowship. She's passionate about weight loss and motherhood and loves to help women optimize their fertility through weight loss. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
So exciting. Yeah. Oh, I love that about the MPH. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did. And health management and policy, but from University of Michigan, not UCLA. So you moved from internal medicine to focusing on weight loss and fertility. What got you interested in this topic?
I could talk on this for hours too, but I'll shorten it. So the first thing that happened is I love medicine. So I love working with patients. And what I did not love is the 10-minute visit. So when you have to learn everything you need to know about someone, because in order to really, give them what they need, understand what's going on, to me, I need more time than 10 minutes. So at the same time, I was moonlighting at a weight loss clinic during my fellowships at UCLA, and they had a weight loss clinic, and I loved it. I spent lots of times with them, with each patient. I got to know them, and it didn't hurt that I always had struggled with my weight too. So it was a perfect match. And to the point where about 12, 13 years ago, I lost 50 pounds and I've kept it off. So I'm not a naturally thin person. And I really feel like I understand all the things that we're going through because it's been years and years for me too. So that got me interested in weight loss. And then in 2019, I went in November 2019, there was a big Obesity Week conference, researchers and clinicians and everything. And I was there just to get the information, the latest information. But what stuck with me was this one speaker who talked about fertility outcomes improving with weight loss. Now, I had known about getting off blood pressure medicines and diabetes medicines. I mean, that was like an easy thing that happened all the time. But this, like my ears perked up. It was so incredible. And since then, I've been so interested in helping women because I love working with patients, but my number one job is mom. And in the universe, if I am asked about it, that's where I want to improve the most. That's where I want to do the most. So I've been on a journey with my kids to become the best mom I can be. And the way that I have found that works the best is improving the relationship with myself, compassion for myself, understanding for myself. When I knew that, it's also the thing that makes you lose weight the best. So when you can have a relationship with yourself with compassion and understanding about mistakes or different decisions that you make, you're better. I am a more patient mother because I'm okay with when I make mistakes. And that's the same thing we need for weight loss. So it all just fits so beautifully together that I couldn't be doing something I love more.
I love hearing everything that you're sharing with us, and I want to even hear more. Tell us about your practice and your approach.
Yeah. So my approach then is guilt-free, deprivation-free, and frustration-free. And to me, that's all you need because if you can do it that way, then you can keep off the weight because that's the other thing. It gets a little tricky with fertility because, of course, we want to then get pregnant and there's going to be some weight gain, which, of course, is natural. And yes, we want that. But when you are losing weight in a way that has your decisions and your relationship with yourself changed, then through pregnancy and then afterwards, it's a completely different story. So it's not about crash diet 3 months before trying to get pregnant. That's not how that works. It's if we do it in this guilt-free, deprivation-free, and frustration-free way, it works to permanently change your mind and your body. So I'm sure you can relate that in terms of the guilt-free, a lot of times people, especially with fertility, will hate their bodies. They'll feel like it's their body's betraying them. It's not. And when you have weight issues and fertility issues, it can really be an obstacle. And I don't know about what you say about this for fertility, but you can't hate your way to less weight. You can't lose weight by hating yourself. You can for a little while because you can force yourself to do something that is painful and difficult. But what happens every time? You'll bounce back up. So that the guilt-free piece is such an important piece, and that's brain things. That's that relationship I was talking about more compassion for yourself and understanding. And when you love something, you take care of it in a way that you don't when you don't love it as much. So that's number one. The deprivation-free piece is, to me, another important piece, because if you feel deprived, again, you're going to bounce right back up. So I start with where people are. I don't care what your diet looks like when we first start. I'm starting with where you are, and we tweak it. I love that word tweak, because it's little tiny changes. It's not, now you're going to go all organic, vegan, if you haven't been doing, if you've been eating fast food all the time. So we tweak, and it works out so beautifully. So I don't want people to be starving, hungry either. And I also don't want them to be very full. So we do work on that about being satisfied, not hungry, and then satisfied. So that's the deprivation piece. And the frustration piece, and that's where I come in. So with those 20 years of 20 years of working with patients on weight loss, that's where I've seen everything. So when someone comes to me with something like I did X, Y, and Z and it's not budging, or whatever it is, I have seen it all. I know exactly. I can hold your hand and I can reassure you. And let me tell you something. When you're working so hard to lose weight, reassurance is what you need. You need to know you're on the right path, because it feels like you're stumbling in the dark sometimes. And when you have someone saying, nope, you're doing it exactly right, it really feels good. So those three pieces get you where you want to go: guilt-free, deprivation-free, and frustration-free.
I love it, because being a fertility patient is very frustrating. And I have patients who they take breaks because they just don't like how their body feels and they want to get their bodies back. And they tell me so often that they've been eating less, restricting their calories more, exercising more. And despite all of that, they've still been gaining weight, 10, 15 pounds. So it's nice to hear that you're able to handhold them through this process so they can be less frustrated. Can you give us a sense a little bit, or a lot, about how weight and fertility actually work together?
Yes, 2 words: insulin and inflammation. So and what's interesting about that to me is there's the 2 pieces. There's that underlying physiology piece separate of the piece about eating. And so what we can do then is work with that piece, the eating piece and timing piece and how your lifestyle works. But what's happening inside is what's important going on. So a lot of times people with extra weight will have insulin resistance. And what that means then is that your insulin level goes too high, sort of all the time. When you have that, and actually, Dr. Amy, you have this great picture, and I think it was like your PCOS blog or something. It was awesome. I actually looked at it because it worked out so well. And so anyone can look at it too if you go to Dr. Amy's blog about PCOS, because it shows that the insulin affects the ovaries, which makes more androgens. And it also affects the liver in a way that proteins aren't made the same. And what that ends up meaning is that testosterone can go up. You can have more. And in PCOS in particular, that happens. And you get manifestations of that, like acne and hair and these sorts of things. But you don't even need that much in order to throw off the hormone balance that can help you ovulate and get pregnant. So there's literally hormone problems with insulin. The other thing too, and it also can lead to this inflammation. And I know you've talked about inflammation before. So inflammation ends up being, and it's there are lots of pathways, and that's above my pay grade, those those pathways. But what happens not only with the insulin and the inflammation is that you have adipose tissue and inflammation. And adipose tissue itself is an endocrine gland. It's endocrine tissue because it holds so much. We used to think it was inert. It's so not inert. There's so much going on. There's estrogen going on too, which can throw off the balance. There's so much that goes on with excess. What's also interesting is we don't know what level the excess is. And we'll probably get into that in a little bit because we don't know where that number is. But we do know that decreasing fat tissue, which is always what we're looking for with weight loss, right? So I don't care how much water weight you have. I mean, it's uncomfortable and who wants it, but it's the fat tissue that we're looking to get rid of. When you're doing that, your body is changing. And that's what we're looking to do when we're losing weight.
Yeah. And then how about IVF success rates and weight loss? Is there a connection between the two?
There is. I wish it was really perfectly defined, but it turns out it's not so much. But they've done some nice studies. Some of them are small. Then they do also meta-analysis, which I'll go into a little bit, showing things like what your weight is at 18, even if it's overweight, but what your weight is at 18. If you start gaining weight, it takes longer to get pregnant. So just having a little more weight on you will slow the process or make it impossible. It's hard to know which one, but just knowing that is important. And then they've showed that, especially anovulatory women who are overweight, if you lose some of that weight, you can get your ovulation back and you can get pregnant either spontaneously, which a few do, or with IVF, where they couldn't have before. So some of these studies were done in the 90s, and then the most recent one that I like the best in terms of being the most recent was a meta-analysis of these studies. And it was in 2019. And I wish it could show numbers, but it did show that a BMI above 30 had poorer rates of success of live birth, because that's, of course, what we're the end goal that we're looking for. So there is a connection.
Mm-hmm. That's great to know. So you've also referenced Janine Roth and her work on your Instagram page. And many folks might be familiar with her work already. What have you found in your work with women, and why food is such a loaded topic?
I do love Janine Roth, and she has a book called Women, Food, and God. And I highly recommend it to anyone listening here. It is a phenomenal read. And she has some ways of thinking about it. And it again comes down to this compassionate piece. So a lot of her work is about your relationship with yourself and your food. And what she talks about, ultimately, she has like 7 rules, and it includes hunger. And what's important about that is a lot of us totally lose our connection to what our body's telling us. I mean, just gone. Like, you don't know when you're hungry, you don't know when you're full, you don't know when you're tired, because you're just going and giving and giving and going and doing. And that piece about being able to reconnect with yourself with hunger ends up being really helpful. I have absolutely seen, it's called intuitive eating, where people can lose the weight and get to where they want just with this hunger piece. In my experience, it takes a longer time. And so I incorporate that as part of it, because learning that whenever you can is amazing. But I also like to have some data, some numbers that we work with. And so I like to incorporate some of Janine Roth, but also this piece about the data. And that's actually, if I can, I'm going to go back to that. There are some numbers that are really important in weight loss and fertility. BMI. So a BMI is a very important number to know, because 35 and 30 are important numbers, sort of like thresholds where we'd like to be. 25 and below, and not too below, is in the normal range, meaning that losing weight then wouldn't make a difference. But from 30 it would, 35 it would, and beyond. Now, here's the other great number. 5% and 10%. And this is why I'm so excited about this. 5% weight loss will make a difference in fertility. Now, this is, when you do tests, it's on groups of people, as you well know about statistics, right? We get statistics and it's very helpful, but each person is different. If we can start with the 5%, so if you're 250 pounds and you go down to 13, so you go down 13 pounds, your body starts, and this is the way I think about it, your body meets you. So a willingness, a change that's meaningful, starts you down the road. And then 10% is our next number. So if we hit 5% first, it's amazing. We hit 10% next, and then we go for the BMIs of lower BMIs. So those numbers end up being really important. And what I love about them is that they're hopeful. So it's not that you have to lose 150 pounds, although of course it's going to be amazing. And if you want to, more power to you. But 5%, 10%, and then the BMIs. And there is data on 50 pounds as a number. They did do studies on that too. So that's another magic number that we have. But we have all these numbers to hit on the way down.
And why is BMI such a controversial topic? I find sometimes when I bring it up, people get triggered and they don't like when I bring it up. So why is the controversy there?
So there's a couple of things about it. It is, it's the same for men and women, which whenever anything's the same for men and women, I'm always like, how is that possible? Because we're very different. So in fact, for men, I actually take the numbers even higher, just because it seems it's very, very thin. Now, it depends on culture is what I'm looking at, because the 25 and below is a very thin weight for our culture right now. Like we have a lot of overweight and obesity. And so when we see that, it's very strange to have this number be very low. And I think that's what it's about. When they did the studies, that's the reason we use BMI. It's a shorthand. It's like a placeholder. It's a thing we have to pick a number, and we picked that. And then I think then the numbers can be so high, because if you're in the 40s and that sort of number, of course, it can feel challenging. And so but I think of it as it was just a sort of arbitrary, not exactly, but a sort of arbitrary place. And then we can just use that number as like a target.
Yeah. And why is food such a loaded topic also? And what makes it so hard to lose weight?
Oh my goodness. I think consistency, and we touched on it, culture. So one of the, this was a while ago and I wish I took it out, but I was looking at a People magazine and it had Jennifer Aniston in it. Okay. And she had what she eats in a day. And she's very thin, by the way. People don't know who Jennifer Aniston is. And she had, it was a beautiful thing that she was eating. It was not a lot of food. She ate beautifully. It was healthy food and whatever. But I wanted to show everyone, to say, see, it's not that she's going out to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We are in a culture that thinks that you should be able to eat out food, either fast food or made by someone else, 3 times a day. And it's just not how bodies were made. And so I think that our thinking is a little off, and people make food that is that you want to keep eating, so we do have a little bit of, whether we can call it addictive or the refined sugar and flour really are things that trigger brain chemistry that do make it hard to stop eating. There's so much going on. The other piece about consistency is that people a lot of times on their own can try for, a bunch of days to try to do something to lose weight. It feels like such a big change in what they normally do. And then after 3 or 4 days, they don't see, 5 pounds off necessarily. And it just feels very defeating. It feels very challenging. That's where that frustration-free comes in. Because when you know you're going to be talking to someone every week about what's exactly going on, you can hang on for the week. And so I think consistency and culture really make food a very difficult issue.
Yeah. And then not only that, when you're a fertility patient, you're also more emotional. You're on hormones that are making you more emotional. So how do emotions and feelings come into play when thinking about food?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So when people are not doing fertility treatment, so in the time before they're doing that, then there's just the regular emotions of, bored, if we only ate for hunger, that would be one thing. But if we eat boredom, we eat angry, we eat sad, we eat lonely, we, that sort of thing. A lot of us learned that as a kid. It was the only way we had to soothe ourselves, to feel better. As a kid, you don't have access to much, but sometimes you can have access to food. And so and if we had parents who were able to tell us how to process our feelings, that would be amazing. But most of us didn't have that, or many, many, many of us didn't have that. I did not have that. And so learning to deal with emotions in a different way than eating really, really makes a big difference. Now, as soon as you put in fertility and hormones, there's real stuff there. Now, what I'll say is, like I was saying before, the water weight is not the main thing we worry about. So we want fat loss. There may be retention. There may be things that are doing that. And when you're learning to cope with feelings without food, then you have more chances of not overeating in those moments. So that's the piece. 100% there is emotion. And when we're learning how to deal with it without food, then we can see the benefit there.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And so what kind of recommendations do you have for patients who are doing treatment, who are facing that challenge, being emotional and using food to self-soothe?
So of course, it's one of those things in prevention. So it's always better to have the tools before you need them. But if you're actually going through it, one of the things that I would highly recommend is first know that it's going to be an emotional time. So accepting that this is what you're going to go through. It's not a surprise, right, that we're going to be emotional with this. First of all, it's an emotional topic. So even if the hormones itself didn't make you more emotional, it's period. It's just waiting. It's anxiety producing. OMG. So knowing and preparing for that. I just heard one of your podcasts that talked about this. Like you had a things to have, team and these sorts of things. 100%, it's exactly the same thing for weight loss. There's no difference at all. Preparing yourself, knowing you're going to go through this is really important. And depending on the foods that you were eating before, you can pick ones. You can decide what you're going to eat if you're feeling this way. You can decide which show you're going to watch. You can decide which friend you're going to call. You can decide which walk you're going to go on. You can decide, so there's so many things there that you can do. The other thing too, and again, you talked about this is mindfulness, is journaling. So part of this is processing the feelings that are happening and being in them, meaning feeling them, tolerating feeling anxious. Oh my gosh, it's not easy, but it's usually happening when you're going through fertility stuff. So being in it and tolerating it rather than eating it is really...
I love it. And along the lines of eating it, are there some foods or kinds of foods that are better for people who want to embark on a health loss journey, especially fertility patients?
Well, again, that's a great question. And the answer is likely yes. However, that's not where I go because, and again, it's because starting where people are. So sometimes with things like the nutritionist can be so good at, foods that have more magnesium and all these sorts of things. But when we're talking about starting from someplace where we're just trying to get the fat tissue off, then those kinds of things can stress someone out if they have to know that they have to have this much of kale and this much. So I really am tweaking, and just by eventually adding fruits and vegetables where you can ends up making such a big difference. And the Mediterranean style diet is such a good one. But if it's so far off from where someone is, then it's a target I work for later. It is so important to just make the little tweaks. What happens when you do that is you're successful. You can keep doing it. It doesn't feel painful. You're not going to rebel against this rule that you've made for yourself. So that's how I think about it in terms of food.
And I joke with patients and I say things like, do you exercise? And I bring up the fact that I'm allergic to it. It makes me red and makes my heart race. And I just get this weird grip on the side of my face. But I feel like what people don't realize is you can accomplish so much just with what you eat and don't have to shame yourself about not jumping on the Peloton 3 times a day.
Yeah, it's even more than that. It's at least 85, if not 90% of weight loss is food related. So that sometimes I don't even ask that they anyone start exercising, because that's just then another habit that they have to pile on top of the other habits that we're trying to change. Exercise is amazing for your heart and your mood and all these other things. It's not the best for weight loss. So I definitely take that into consideration.
Well, I'm glad you agree with me. And then I just want to talk about, you mentioned hunger and feeling full versus satisfied when eating. Why is this important to understand?
Oh, it's so important. It goes to understanding when you're emotionally hungry versus physically hungry. So what I like to teach people is a hunger scale. And the hunger scale is literally numbers. So I start at plus 5. Plus 5 is like Thanksgiving full, like you're undoing your pants, you're so uncomfortable. It goes through 0 to -5, and -5 is completely empty. You have symptoms of feeling completely empty. And where we're really supposed to be is -2 to +2. So we're never supposed to be at 3, 4, and 5. And sometimes people are very used to, what will happen is a lot of the times is people will not eat all day. And so they'll get to -5. And then when you get to -5, you are so over hungry that you end up eating to 5. And you get so many more calories in there than if you had been eating along the way. So the -2 to +2 is where we want you to be. +2 means satisfied, which is a really interesting word. So it means you're not hungry, but you're also not full. And learning how to do that is, boy, that really takes some practice. And -2 means you're starting to get hungry. It doesn't mean ignore it and pretend it'll go away and hope it'll go away. No, because it may go away for a moment, but then it comes back as a 3, and then it comes back as a 4, and then it comes back as a -5. And that's a problem because of the overeating. So we want to learn how to eat when you're just hungry, which is -2, and then stop when you're satisfied. It's a process to learn.
Wow. And I imagine you take your patients through that as well.
Definitely. Yes.
So if someone wants to find out more about you and your programs, where can they find you?
At stephaniefeinmd.com, and Fein is Fein. And then on Instagram, I'm at Stephanie Fein MD. So Stephanie Fein MD everywhere you could put it in. Facebook also.
Great. And then what kind of goals do you have for your patients as far as weight loss? Like if someone were to come to you and they needed to lose 40 pounds, like what kind of timing can they expect to lose? Because that's the thing. Everyone wants to know, how fast can I get pregnant? When can I do a transfer? And I imagine that's a question they ask you too. Like I need to lose, or I want to lose 20 to 40 pounds, or even that 50 pounds. How long will it take me to get there?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So that's why I love all the different numbers that we talked about, the 5% and 10%, the 50 pounds, all that sort of stuff. It absolutely depends on each person. So I wish I could, I'm sure that you end up saying the same thing, but it really depends. It depends. Oftentimes, if you have more to lose, it can come off faster. That's not always the case, but sometimes what I know to be true is if you're losing weight, especially in the way that I do it, where we're tweaking and it's not anything dramatic, or you're eating 500 calories a day, you are improving the physiology the whole way along so that you are in a better position to do IVF, to get pregnant, any of those things the whole time that is working. So we want to get to those special numbers. There is data to show certain things, but remember, statistics are useful, but they don't necessarily mean you. So we're working towards there. I always feel like that willingness, that real change that's happening is worth a lot. And I think it shows up physiologically, but also in the attitude and what you're doing. So I wish I could give a number, but it can go relatively quickly. I do 3-month chunks. That's how I usually work with people.
Got it. Great. Well, thank you for all your work helping fertility patients. And I love everything about you, your website. I love that it is speaking to fertility patients. And I imagine you work with men as well.
That's a great point. Not as much. It usually ends up being women, but I could, because you're absolutely right. There's data to show about that the men also, it's helpful. I will say that a lot of times men will lose weight when their wives or partners, the couple ends up losing weight together when one person is affected, because they're starting to make different choices for themselves, and that just naturally affects the other person. So 2 for 1.
Well, thank you for being on today. I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I am just really, really excited to be part of this community. First of all, your community is amazing. And I know that people who are going through infertility are heroes. They are heroes. And I always thought that about people who are trying to lose weight too. Anyone trying to make a huge change or try something that seems impossible is a hero to me. And I want people to feel that for themselves, because often that's not what's going on. So it is not a little thing to go through infertility treatments. It is not a little thing to lose a lot of weight. So I know it can be done, and I honor anyone who's going through this.
Oh, I couldn't have said that better myself, especially now with COVID. I mean, imagine going through the pandemic and having fertility issues, and truly each and every one of them is a hero to me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Stephanie. I appreciate you. We all appreciate you. Keep up the great work and continue to inspire us to be our best version of ourselves. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Abaza,
And you have yet another success story.
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.